All right, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
I'm going to get started. My name is Lauren Williams. I'm Adult and Community Services Manager here at the Columbia Public Library, which is part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library System. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. We'll hear from Professor Emeritus Nancy F. Browning about the impact of diversity education, and Barbara Hoppe will be introducing her in just a moment. But first, just want to do a little housekeeping. Today's Lunch and Learn is presented by the library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County, and we're very grateful for this ongoing partnership with the League. We have people attending both in person here in a slightly different venue in the library, the Virginia Young Room, our board room, and then also folks on Zoom. So a couple of Zoom housekeeping items. If you're on Zoom and want to ask a question, we ask that you use the chat feature. So use the drop-down menu and please select that everyone can see your chat questions so that others in the audience online know what questions have been asked. And then when it's time for folks to ask questions here, I think we're a fairly small room, so we may not need to use this microphone, but if anyone's having trouble hearing, we can definitely pass the microphone around. We are recording today's presentation, so it will be available in a few days, both on the League's YouTube channel and the library's YouTube channel. And now I'd like to welcome Barbara Hoppe of the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Lauren Williams and the Columbia Public Library for co-hosting our Lunch and Learn programs every month. It's really appreciated. I thought before I introduce Nancy Browning, I would this time just let you know what's coming up. Usually I do that at the end, but a lot of people aren't paying attention, but there's a lot going on. First, we have 3 Lunch and Learn programs coming through May, and in April, we'll have Gina H., who's a policy analyst with the Missouri Budget Project, and she will speak on what you need to know about taxes in Missouri for 2026. Then in May, we'll have the president of Stevens College, London, and she'll talk about the importance, pardon? Oh, I have it in May. Oh, well. And it will be the importance of women in higher education. And she'll also give us an update on Stevens College and what they're doing. But I also wanted to tell you, coming up this month is When She Votes, February 21st, here at the Public Library, 10 to 11:30. And then March 19th, we have our election forum here again at the library with the candidates for City Council and for the school board. So that's coming up. And now I'd like to introduce Nancy Browning, and she will speak on Now That My Eyes Are Open, how learning about diversity changes lives, and a little bit about her. She taught cultural diversity in modern America to thousands of students at Lincoln University. In her retirement, she attends and teaches at Osher classes. She facilitates the Social Justice Book Club and edits the catalog. She also edits academic papers for an international clientele and also writes children's books. So with that, I give you Nancy Browning.
The stories that you'll hear today are based on that general education class that she just talked about at Lincoln University, which is the historically Black College University, if you're not familiar. And it was a writing intensive class. So as part of that, students learned about systems of oppression and privilege, including racism, sexism, classism, ableism, heterosexism, classism. And they were invited to look really closely at the world and observe things that they saw and look at the news and to bring those into our classroom. So you'll hear the words of my students, some of whom chose pseudonyms and all of whom gave me permission to share their work. I've interwoven their words with mine to make the talk flow, so I won't be interrupting with lots of quote marks, which you will see if you look at the paper. Anyway, I also want to let you know that I retired in 2011. All these stories came from between 1996 and around 2012. They are not dated, however, sadly. I think many of the things that happened that I'm telling you about would still happen or happen really similarly. But you will also notice some of the language that students use, like if they say handicapped, I didn't change that to disabled or anything else. So if you hear something, then you think, we don't say that anymore. No, we don't, but That's what they said. And this talk is called Now That My Eyes Are Open, because students repeatedly made that remark, both in writing and verbally, about the class. And it's true, once your eyes are open, it's really hard to not see the things that have come up. So first, I'm going to share from a number of what we call final projects. Students had 6 to 8 weeks to work on things, and they came up with their projects, and a lot of them were experiments where they sent like a Black person and a white person to certain places. So in one of them, a white male student and his Black male friend visited jewelry stores at the Columbia Mall on separate days, but when they went, they wore the same suit, they said the same things. And one of the really interesting things that I found in teaching this class is that yes, racism and all the other isms can be really like pound you on the head, but they also can be so insidious, you would never know if you did not do an experiment. So for example, what they found was the white man was allowed to hold the engagement ring when he asked for it. And the Black man, they just put the hand out and said, look at the ring, which, neither one of them felt like they had a bad experience, but once they compared their experiences, they found out that there's differences. So the talk is prepared and I practiced it. It took 44 minutes. So I may stop somewhere in the middle toward the end, just because I want to make sure there's time for questions, but if you could keep your questions till the end, that would be great. So Jeremy's investigation of classism at a local bank evolved from an observation that he had witnessed. He witnessed a man came into the bank dressed very poorly with dirty, worn clothes. He carried a brown paper bag of pennies and requested that a teller count them. The teller declined and said the bank didn't offer this service. So Jeremy had his brother enter the same bank several days later, asking the same teller to count pennies in a bag, but he had his brothers dressed in nice Docker pants, a nice shirt, smelled of cologne, and immediately the teller took the bag of pennies and ran them through the change machine. Ashley also looked at discrimination and banking, and she tallied the number of Black people versus the white people who were asked for identification when making a transaction at the bank. And she works there, so she got permission to do that. Although she investigated racism, Ashley noticed that one teller treated the business appearing customers much better than the people who were dressed in sweats and tennis shoes. Interestingly, the teller used a much more sincere voice with the white customers than with the Black customers. When observing the third teller, Ashley reports, she was very pleasant and sociable with all of the white customers, regardless of what kind of transaction they were making, but she was snappy and rude to most of the Black customers. She denied 2 Black customers service because they didn't have proper identification, but then I noticed she let a white male in a Cadillac with leather seats not show his ID to cash a large check. After this incident, Ashley looked for more correlation between car type and treatment. She found that one Black customer who drove an Expedition with a leather interior was the only Black customer who the teller said thank you to in a sincere tone. All of the customers who drove older, dented vehicles were given the nasty tone of voice and treated differently than those who drove ritzy vehicles, regardless of race. So we will see classism rear its ugly head many times. By going twice to the same gas station with 2 different cars and dressed 2 different ways, Kim and Connie, who were both white female, explored how offers for help were related to class. When trying to appear lower class, Connie describes her appearance. I was wearing pink sweatpants that were really large with oil stains and rips in them, with loafers that were busted out on all sides, and red socks that were full of holes. Connie's hair was very straight and greasy looking, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. As soon as they pulled up in a dilapidated gray van, people began staring. Then Kim took notes from inside the waiting area, while Connie opened the hood and, as she said, twisted wires and acted disgusted. For the first 5 minutes, there was not a single offer of help. Several people just would stare and walk by. Those who walked past also avoided eye contact with Connie. Of the many people who walked past in the 30 minutes, only 6 stopped, mainly men. When Connie explained the project to them and asked why they had stopped to help, they said that the way that she was dressed wouldn't have made a difference, in their opinion. In contrast, when Connie pretended to be higher class, she said, I look like a cover girl with makeup and a bunch of gold and diamonds. My hair was curled and pulled up on my head. This time they arrived at the same station in Kim's nice white newer model van. Kim declared, "We weren't even there long enough for me to get inside and seated in my lookout area before Connie received her first offer of help." Connie surveyed some of the people who stopped to help, showing them a Polaroid of how she looked an hour ago and asking if they would have stopped had she looked that way. Some said it wouldn't have mattered, as they are poor too. Unfortunately, a heavy rain truncated their visit, so we're not sure. But they got more offers of help in the shorter amount of time, dressed up. Kim admitted that out of fear of the unknown, I can honestly say I probably wouldn't have helped Connie either. What was perhaps most insightful were Connie's views on her first-hand experience of being treated as a lower class person. "I did not like it. I felt like I was invisible." Because Connie works at the Head Start, she already had personal knowledge of struggling families, but putting myself literally in their shoes was a good experience for me. Interestingly, when Kim and Connie told their pastor about the results of their project, he gave a sermon about it. Shabazz chose to experience how a homeless Black person might be treated in an upscale, predominantly white mall. To get an idea of how being homeless might feel, Shabazz and her mother went to the dumpster near her apartments to find her outfit. When she commented to her mother, "I feel dirty doing this," Shabazz's mother countered with, "Well, how do you think some homeless people get their clothing?" Shabazz wore a cream hat, big pink glasses, high water blue jeans, different colored socks with holes in them, with her toes sticking through the socks and brown socks. She also sprinkled dirt on her outfit to make it more effective. Shabazz selected an observation team. That's something I always told them to do if you're walking and shopping, you don't know what people are doing behind you. So, who told her that at the mall, she received funny looks from customers and employees. The first store I entered, I was greeted with a pleasant smile and the sales lady spoke to me in a nice way. But that was the last nice conversation that she had there. Besides stares, Shabazz received laughs from customers as they passed me. And little children stared and pointed at me like I was a circus clown. At one store, she was ignored. However, when her friends entered, the sales lady immediately gave Sarita assistance. Similarly, at another store, the sales lady spoke to everyone and never acknowledged me or offered to help. At one store, after Shabazz was repeatedly asked if she needed help, she was watched constantly. At yet another store, she looked around for about 10 minutes without getting assistance, but one sales lady was standing close to me. She acted like she was afraid to even stand near me. In another store, Shabazz was followed. In all, Shabazz entered 9 shops, getting similar treatments. Her observation team noticed the sales personnel laughing and talking about me when I left. When Shabazz finally decided to buy something, she removed $200 from her bag, and the clerk stared at her in disbelief. At that point, Shabazz explained her diversity project, to which the sales clerk said, "How did we do?" I replied with a serious tone and a serious face, "You failed." The store manager looked disturbed and scared and wondered if they'd asked to help or if they were too busy to help. Shabazz replied, "No, there was an employee standing around staring at me." She also confronted the employee who had failed to help her, saying, "How did you feel about me when I entered the store? Why didn't you greet me when I came in?" The employee stood there speechless. Interestingly, when Shabazz's mother purchased a few things, the store manager gave them a 1/3 off discount, feeling ashamed and guilty in all likelihood for her and for her employees' actions. Shabazz wondered if it was an attempt at a cover-up. Shabazz states that doing this research paper and going out dressed like a homeless bag lady truly opened my eyes and made me see how they're mistreated. In some ways, this mistreatment really affected me because I wasn't Shabazz anymore. I was a homeless bag lady, and that's how they saw me. I felt like less of a human being. She adds, "I can admit sometimes before I did this project, I would judge a person by their appearance and assumed they were poor, uneducated, dirty, lazy, etc. Now I don't judge anyone because I'm not worthy to judge another human being." Shabazz hopes that others will learn from my project because they can understand the humiliation and the feeling of being a missing person in society. He states, "This experience truly woke me up." And finally, she pleads for all of us to help find the missing persons in society. In addition, when she came to my office to get a copy of the photo I'd taken of her in her project clothing, she told me she was going to save it for her grandchildren. And I said, "Shabazz, do you have children yet?" "No." And, I thought this is like so life-changing that she wanted to save it. Anna had helped her boyfriend with their family's concrete business and is capable of doing most of the work herself. So she designed her project to learn how the male employees would react to her doing this work if she dressed up like all of the other guys at the disguise. By tucking her hair under a hat, pulled down near her eyes, and wearing overalls, Anna maintained her disguise until asked her name. When she replied, Anna, her coworker questioned, "What are you doing here? How do you think you're going to do this kind of work?" The workers kept her gender a secret when others visited the site, but they did not respect her request for them to act as if I were one of the guys. Instead, she became the runner, like run and get this, run and get that. And not only was she asked for almost every tool imaginable, but some even felt the need to describe the tool as if she did not know what it was. When the concrete drivers saw Anna and asked, "Who's the new guy?" her boyfriend replied, "You mean the new girl?" The drivers laughed, and then one of them said, "Surely he's not that bad of a worker." What is he, just a wimp? Her boyfriend was quick to add, "I'm serious, that is my girlfriend, Anna." One of them rolled his eyes at the idea. The second driver asked, "So how's she holding up? I mean, being a girl and all, can she actually do the work?" Similarly, when the owner of the property came to inspect things and asked about the new guy, he queried, "She's not going to hold you guys up, is she? Does she even know what she's doing?" Fortunately, he accepted the response of Anna's boyfriend's father. "You'd be surprised. She works harder than some of the guys do, and she's done this stuff before." Sadly, Anna states, "I am not really surprised by the reactions I received. I think men are almost scared of the idea that a woman is able to do the work that was previously just for men. This idea makes them feel insecure." At a local car dealership, when looking for a truck, Carol was asked outright, "Why are you looking for a truck?" It was only when Carol offered that she and her husband will share it and that he was the primary driver that the salesperson appeared to shake his head in agreement and then continued to talk about the truck. At another dealership, Carol reported that when looking at a truck, it took a long time to be helped. And when she finally had the salesperson's attention, he quickly said, "You don't want that truck. It's for pulling campers and hauling things. That would be too big of a truck for a woman." However, when her husband entered the same dealership, not only was he approached quickly by a salesperson, but when he asked about the same large truck, the salesman said nothing about him not wanting that truck. Instead, her husband was asked if he wanted to test drive it. Nick, a white student, took a black male friend, Javon, to his rural hometown of Dixon, Missouri, to see how Nick's other friends would react. After purchasing sodas at a store, Javon left, and then the woman at the counter asked Nick, "What are you doing with that black person?" Nick told her, "He is my friend and we're going to the game." Her exact words were, "Does your grandmother know you're friends with a black boy?" When they sat at the school stadium, the crowd gave looks of disgust, and some women even grabbed their purses as if Javon was going to jump up, grab their purse, and run. We were on one end of the bleachers and everyone sat as far to the other side as possible. Some of Nick's friends, who usually talked to him, only said hello. Eventually, two of Nick's close friends sat with him, seeming a little apprehensive at first. Later, they told Nick that they had never hung out with a black person before. They said, "Javon's pretty cool. He's not what I expected at all." I knew they had expected a gangster type personality and they expected him to talk in slang and dress like gang members might dress. Javon is the total opposite of that. When Nick went to the concession stand, two guys I know approached and wanted to know why I had brought a black person to their town. They proceeded to tell me he wasn't welcome and I should just take him back where I got him from. When Nick told them he wasn't planning to take Javon home yet, they threatened, "Wait till after the game, then we'll see." At a local gas station, Nick was asked, "Do you actually have and they said, NIG with you?" I said, "You mean a black person?" And yes, I do. Their response was, "Why?" "He's my friend, just like you guys are," was my answer. As Javon walked toward the store to pay for gas, a local cop pulled up and Nick knew that meant trouble. So he entered the store. He states, "I found out when I got in the store that the clerk had called the station and said she wanted a cop to stop by because there was a black person in the parking lot." Even though Javon only looked for a drink, the clerk told him he had better leave and that she had already called the police. Javon tried to pay for the gas and she wouldn't take his credit card. She told Javon they don't accept credit cards, although Nick had paid with credit cards many times in the past. Javon said, "The door says you take credit cards, so don't tell me cash only." Nick then intervened, telling Javon and the officer he would pay for the gas, to which the officer replied, Well, that sounds fine with me, but I better not hear of any more trouble with you tonight. Police officer continued, my advice is to go back where you're from because we don't like trouble in our town. From then on, the police car followed them everywhere. People were honking their horns and saying things like, go home, and word, shouldn't you be picking cotton, and long lives the South. And it was really only after we did that project that I thought, I should not have let him do this. You know, but an African-American female, Lisa, related the background for her investigation. One weekend when I went to Houston, myself and a Black male friend of mine took my white female friend's kids to the mall, where it seemed like we were being followed. When one of the children cried because she wanted something she couldn't have, Lisa bent down to talk to her. Suddenly, security arrived, taking the children to the side to ask them questions. They handcuffed the Black male, meanwhile holding me, telling me we had better tell them where we got these children from while we waited for the Houston police to get there. We were going to be formally charged with kidnapping. Children were crying. I was telling them what was going on, cussing up a storm. Security said they could arrest me for assault and battery on a police officer for cussing at them. In the end, we called the mother of the children and she had to take off work to come down and explain. When all of this was over, we never received an apology. Lisa wanted to see if this was an isolated incident or if it would happen elsewhere. So she had Black adults take white children and white adults take Black children to predominantly white and Black malls in Texas and Oklahoma. So I'm just going to call them white and Black malls. We know they're not. They're predominantly white or Black malls. In one white mall, security followed a Black male with a white boy for the entire 30 minutes they shopped, and security followed him to the car and wrote down his license plate. The next day, Lisa and her Black male friend returned to the mall with 2 white children. There were no problems until Bradley decided to act like he was going through his terrible twos, and Derek decided to play daddy and discipline his child. Security was instantly at our sides, questioning who we were, who the children were in relation to us, and asking the children if they had been kidnapped or abused. We were followed to our car and the license plate number was written down. However, when a white couple escorted 2 Black children to the same mall, nothing happened other than some staring. Lisa and Derek also got this reaction at one of the predominantly white malls. However, when Lisa shopped with the white children, a middle-aged white female approached her saying, it's hard to find good help these days, especially when it comes to help with your children. Do you work for an agency? And when Derek shopped with the children, Lisa eavesdropped on a group of white women who seemed to be staring the hardest. One of the ladies said, I can understand them dating, but my God, does she really trust him enough to let him take her children out alone? When seeing the Black children with the white male, a Black woman posed the question, how do you suppose his parents feel about that? And this young white boy that worked in the store said, he must be a big brother or something. At a different mall, a white couple expressed this concern. If they are going to adopt or whatever, why flaunt them in public? A Black couple said, just like white people always want to be one up on us, now they want to take our children. At another upscale white mall, Lisa was detained when trying to leave a store. At the manager's office, she was asked if the children belonged to her, and she was told, there doesn't have to be any trouble if you just tell me who these children belong to. If you are the nanny or whatever, just identify yourself. Lisa was only allowed to go after she explained her project and called the children's mother. Within 5 minutes of his arrival, Derek was similarly questioned by security and the police about where he got the children. But taking the white children to predominantly Black mall provoked no such reaction. So, on to country clubs. Okay, to look at potential racism at country clubs, Alex sent 4 couples to ask about membership, a Black couple, a white couple, and 2 interracial couples with the different genders. The Black couple received the worst treatment, first being ignored for about 15 minutes. Some people walked around as if they were too busy to help them, and others just acted like they did not see them. Finally, a man said, is there something you need? Which was a very different question than the question they asked to everyone else. During that entire time, all of the white people were staring at them. When they asked for a membership, the clerk left and did not come back for over 25 minutes, so they left. Before they reached the counter, the white male and Black female couple were greeted. Hello, sir. How may I help you? The clerk maintained eye contact. No one stared at the couple. The other interracial couple was treated similarly, except that the man behind the counter looked at the black male first with a disgusted look, then saw the white female. He looked back at the black male, smiled and said, "Hello, sir. How may I help you today?" When the white couple arrived, the clerk was so busy, he immediately apologized for not acknowledging them when they first stepped up to the counter. After showing them the forms, he invited them to tour the facility, something that the other couples were not invited to do. As Alex interprets his data, he believes that the treatment of the black couple relates to the myth, "You don't play golf, it's the white sport, why are you here?" Because the question, "Is there something you need?" was asked, it implies that the man feels they are not there to play golf, but for some other reason, maybe to apply for a job or make a delivery, thus putting them on a slightly lower plane than the rest of the people there, including the workers. Other students explored the connection between race and discrimination while shopping for a car. Two friends, Laurie, a white female, and Tamala, a black female, controlled the circumstances of their shopping by going on different days with the same car, a 3-year-old Grand Am, pretending to want a new Camry. Laurie, the white person, was greeted almost immediately. The next day, when Tamala shopped, the same salesperson took 15 minutes to assist her. Even though Tamala expressed an interest in a new Camry, the salesman told me that he had some nice used Toyota Camrys that he would be glad to show me. Something he did not discuss with Laurie. And when they talked about the trade, the salesman then stated that I probably still owed a lot on the Grand Am, therefore my payments would be pretty high. He did not say this to Laurie. The trade amount was $700 lower. Again, the salesperson pushed the used Camry, stating that he could probably cut me a better deal on one of the used models. As Tamala states, before taking this class, I would never have expected these types of results. This only opens my eyes to the world a little more as to what I can expect when I am making a substantial purchase. Okay, now we're going to go into the hospital. Having worked at the hospital for 3 years, Leah, who was the white woman, knew that a majority of the older patients treat our black nurses and technicians differently than the white nurses and technicians. For example, a white nurse might be asked something, whereas a black nurse might be ordered to do it. Another problem is that some patients assume that the black nurses are the lowest level staff and they are not seen as the charge nurse. As an LPN, Leah sometimes had questions directed to her when both she and the black RN were right there in the same room. At one time, after introducing herself, the black nurse was summoned by a patient being referred to as the little colored girl. In another case, the family directed the questions to an older white technician rather than the black nurse. Another African-American nurse was referred to as a black heifer. Some patients refused care from a black male nurse. The discrimination also came from hospital personnel, such as when there was a safety fair where nurses took required tests. The two black RNs were given LPN tests without being asked their job title, but two white nurses approached the testing area. They were asked LPN or RN. Because the wrong tests were given out that year, the following year, the process changed so that all personnel were asked their title. And I'm not sure if that's because my student brought that up, but I think it may have changed because of that. Donna and Roberta's project investigated discrimination in housing based on sexual orientation and race. They sent 4 ostensible couples apartment hunting: a white couple, a black couple, a lesbian couple, and a gay male couple. For consistency, all the men wore slacks with polo shirt, all the women wore dresses. Every couple was told to arrive 5 minutes early for their appointment with the apartment owner. They were instructed that we instructed that all the couples hold hands. We see them as a couple. This would give the interviewer, the right conclusion about them. Additionally, we required all the couples bring back an application. We encouraged them not to leave without a tour, and they were to find out about the neighborhood and the crime rate. Before leaving, they were to thank the interviewer for the appointment and let them know they were anxious to hear back from him. The white couple was greeted with a smile. They were not asked about their rental history, and the landlord, Max, offered them an application right away. When describing the neighborhood, he said it was quiet, with very little crime. After the appointment, Max acted excited about the couple possibly renting. He told them he would call them back, and he did the first day of the second week of our study and informed them they could move in as soon as possible. The black couple received almost the same treatment. Besides being treated pleasantly, he offered them an application right away, but they were asked about their rental history. And when Max described the neighborhood, he told them there was moderate noise and crime. only gonna get worse. Strangely, although he called the next week and offered them the apartment, he told them they would have to wait a month to move in. Whereas the first two couples did not receive any negative looks or body language, the lesbian couple complained of both. Max greeted them with a smile, just like the other two couples, but that quickly changed when he noticed the two women holding hands. Kim said that he couldn't keep his eyes off our hands. The women had to ask for an application because he never mentioned it. He did not ask about their rental history. Max described the neighborhood as noisy with a fairly high crime rate. Additionally, he runs them around so quickly that one of the participants said she couldn't even describe how the apartment looked. Although he promised to call them back, he never did. The gay male couple received the worst treatment. As with the other couples, they were initially greeted with a smile. When Max observed the two guys holding hands, he very quickly changed his facial expression to a confused, weird look, according to one of the participants. From that point on, Max continued to keep his head down as if avoiding eye contact with the two. As with the lesbian couple, the gay couple had to ask for an application. In addition, Max asked about their rental history and seemed hesitant when they asked if they could look around. He informed them that the noise level was bad and the crime rate was high. Instead of showing them around the apartment, Max stayed out of their way. He called the next week and told them another couple had rented the apartment. Donna was surprised and pleased that Max was not overtly racist. Donna wondered if all apartment owners were like Max, wouldn't it be hard for homosexuals to live? She was glad I chose this experiment because it gave me a chance to see how prejudiced people can affect someone's life in a big way. And Roberta made her own summation. We were able to see the discrimination people have to go through. It's going to be hard, especially with people out there that are homophobic, like myself and Max. As she wrestles with her homophobia, Roberta can now feel for gay and lesbian people and see the harsh world they have to face. This is a story about disability, and it's still hard for me to believe it. I mean, I believe it, but wait till you hear it. Amanda realized that when discussing diversity issues, one really thinks about people with physical or mental handicaps and how they're oppressed or stereotyped. Therefore, she and her partner investigated how a group of college students with hearing impairments is treated while on a trip to a state park. Amanda noticed that the tour guide would not even talk directly to the group. When she did talk to the group, she sounded like she was talking to elementary school students. She used simple words and she talked very slowly and very loud. At one point, the tour guide asked in a kindergarten teacher's voice, "Now, would you like to see the remains of the castle? It is very old." One surprising and disturbing event occurred when the group faced a flight of steps that is very steep in the park. In front of the stairs was a sign that said, "Only people who are physically fit should attempt to climb these stairs." Because the tour guide only encouraged Amanda and her partner to use the stairs and said that others should not attempt the stairs, remember they're there with a hearing impairment, the interpreter removed the group from the park. When they arrived at another campground, they were given a particular campsite until the person in charge noticed the interpreter signing. When he was informed that 10 students were deaf, he suggested that we take a campsite that was closer to the store and bathroom. He did not want the deaf students to become tired from all of the walking. His suggestions for recreation only included shopping or miniature golf and not the natural areas such as the numerous area caves or the dam. One trend that Amanda noticed was that the interpreter was treated as if she were in charge of them. Amanda observed that people talked down to the deaf students as if they were stupid or childlike. She also noticed with regret that our book of readings did not address discrimination related to disabilities, but we remedied that. And that same thing happens to people who have to use a wheelchair. Someone's pushing and they talk to the person, you know, as if the other person isn't there. All right, so that's a good segue. We've got wheelchairs next. Because she was recently consigned to a wheelchair for a short period of time due to foot surgery, Gail, who happens to be a white female, shopped at the local mall in a wheelchair to see how she would be treated. The difference between when I was there 5 months ago and 2 weeks ago was that I was now paying attention. I couldn't believe all the stares and curiosity I saw on people's faces. I had a friend wheel me around, and when we saw people we knew, they would talk to her and ignore me. Even after I told them I was doing a project and I wasn't hurt, they seemed uncomfortable looking down at me, so they barely acknowledged I was there. Gail reported that while wheeling herself about for around 10 minutes, not one person asked if I needed help or anything. She also observed that the clerks acted as if it was a big hassle to help me, as if I wasn't a normal customer and didn't deserve to be treated as one. It seemed that the female clerks were more likely to help me than the male clerks. The male clerks treated me as if I wasn't there, only bothering with the good-looking and able-bodied women. Additionally, maneuvering was difficult because she couldn't get between the racks of clothes, aisles were narrow, and there were only 2 ramps in the mall. And neither the doors to the mall nor the doors to the restroom are handicapped accessible, necessitating assistance that might not be available. Even when someone held a door for her, sometimes it slammed on her. Gail commented, "My results really surprised me. I never realized how indifferent the attendants and customers are to handicapped shoppers. Not being in a wheelchair, a person doesn't realize how hard it is for someone in a wheelchair to get around. If I were permanently handicapped, I think that it would be very easy to become frustrated when shopping if I was treated as inferior or the other shoppers just because I was in a wheelchair." She believes that many people would benefit from doing an experiment like hers. When people are discriminated against because of their disability, society tends to see the disability as their math or status. That means the primary way that they're viewed. In addition to completing the final projects, students were also invited at the end of class to create a page of diversity goals. And if they didn't have goals, I wasn't going to force them. They had to write a page why they didn't. So we won't, I think like 3 people did that in the whole 10, 15 years I did. Most people had goals. Kel, a Black female, states, "I suppose for most of my life, including the time I spent in this class, I saw everything in black and white. I never really paid attention to any other types of groups. Even in this class, I was not interested in talking about other racial groups. I believe this alone made me a closed-minded person, something I never thought I was. My goal is to feel passionate toward all groups of people and be willing to listen to all sides of the story." Nicholas, a white student, stated, "I think more white people need to stand up to other whites who still possess racial hatred." Penny, who is white, stated, "I never gave myself the chance to really think about specific goals concerning cultural diversity. Now, after taking a cultural diversity class, I believe every person in our nation should think seriously about their cultural diversity goals." The variety within Penny's goals is fairly typical as she hopes to research her family history, continue reading culturally diverse literature, find my voice and express it when confronted with racist jokes, comments, and slurs, and get rid of stereotypes that remain in my mind. Stephanie's diversity goal is a very simple one. It has always infuriated me how people constantly complained about their lives. I've always felt you make your own life. Although that is very easy for me to say, I am not Chinese, Japanese, Black, or any other race, I am white, and I have only lived in the shoes of a white person. She plans to listen more, not ignoring them, thinking they're being paranoid. Taking this class has taught me that people have really suffered dearly and are still being treated unfairly. But I can tell you from now on, I will not be one of those people to treat others unfairly. Tara states, I can look back over the last month and see that I have been correcting people on their stereotyping jokes and informing them that these things truly are not funny. So my goal is to not find humor at the expense of another person's pain. When Sherry had seen a person of Mexican descent, she had thought that they won't speak English and that they are illegal, even though she realized that is terrible to say. Instead, Sherry wants to think something positive about each person she sees, as she is able to do when she sees someone that people might find not very attractive. Lily chose not to listen to stereotypical ideas about a group or culture. In the future, I will communicate to the group or person who's being stereotyped to develop a relationship with them to maximize understanding. One example she provides is that she constantly gets upset with an Iranian scrub technician at work due to his actions toward women. At first, another coworker attributed the technician's actions to his culture, saying that women are considered second-class citizens in Iran, but Lily discussed the situation with the technician. Interestingly, he did not even realize he was doing anything demeaning toward women. Together, we talked about the situation. He informed me that sometimes I made him feel as though he were a second-class citizen. We decided that if one of us was making the other one feel like a second-class citizen, we would say, I am not a second-class citizen, and this would be our joke between us. Black students also shed their prejudices, as did Andre, who said, this class really helped me understand white America. I honestly believed at one time that all white people didn't like blacks. Yes, I know it's crazy, but that was just the way I thought due to many experiences. Thanks to cultural diversity, I no longer think that it is possible to create a world that can totally get rid of hate, prejudices, stereotypes, and other negative things that separate us from being one positive nation. And instead of reading the last, it's more things like that. I'll let the goal go. And I just want to make just a few comments before we have questions. I said at the beginning, we can't be sure these things are still happening, but I think we can be pretty sure that things that are really like this are still happening. So I just want to keep that, that's kind of like sad, honestly, when some of these stories are 25, almost 30 years old, and and most of them are at least 20 years old. But anyway, now I'll entertain questions from here or the Zoom, however you wish for me to do that. Yeah, Mara.
Hi.
Hi.
We used to be colleagues together. So that certain kinds of discrimination we know is happening. And I think that next door to me, there is discrimination happening. I live over at East Campus, and the next door is a rental property, right? And I've lived there for 12 years. And that entire time, though the rental changes out every single year, every single year, bar none, it has changed out. It is always young white women.
Mm-hmm.
Always 100% of the time, young white women that live there. And we can't be sure, right? Because it may be that, oh, well, these are, anthropology students who told other anthropology students about, rentals happen in all kinds of different ways, but I strongly suspect that they are discriminating in terms of that rental. And so I guess this is for anyone, maybe you, what do you do, when you see something like that? And this is like, I've literally been watching this for 12 years, and is there any way to respond to it? We know it's happening. People are seeing this all the time, right?
Did you want to say something?
Oh, well. Well, my first thought was to talk to the landlord and raise the issue and just see what they say. And then I guess there's like the neighborhood services from the city, and that you could go, they're pretty good. You could go and see what their suggestions are too. Yeah, because you don't know, whether it's just women telling women this is a great place and passing it down or not. Yeah. But
well, I have a few things running through my head. One is, if they're your neighbor, talk to them and say, hey, like, I had to find out about this apartment. Did you find it, whatever. And if they're like, oh, it's my friend, and their friend, you at least would know. You could also do little experiments like this, because my students, I also had a Black student who, would talk in her she said this, white voice, and call places to see if they were available. And when she got there, they weren't, so I had students who also used different voices and had different people, and it was amazing how much difference. Like a British accent was a plus, but you could the next time it's coming to be due again, you could, send some different people and see what happens. If you wanted to, send him. All right, thanks for that question. Yeah, Lori.
Nancy, at any time in your classes, did you track the data of positive, negative, try, and it's tough to do in these types of teams,
right,
but did you try and track that?
Well, to repeat the question, did I try to track the data? The data is pretty small, N of 4 or something like that. And also my students, they really did want to find discrimination. And I told them, we really don't want to find discrimination. You still get a good grade if you do a project. But honestly, there were so few where everything happened, equitably, fairly, and justly. The only one I can remember is the Saturn dealership, and they sent people of different sizes, shapes, and colors, and everybody got the same price. And I was like, wow. And there might have been one other one where everybody was like, oh, really? But almost otherwise, you know, if you're dressed up, if you're white, now if you're a white person who really dresses down and, you know, has some tattoos and your hair is green, you know, you dealers don't like you either, you know, but it really just concurred with all the things that people that my students had told me. But what I still find most interesting is if you hadn't sent these different groups with others to compare, you wouldn't know that you missed that application, or they say, oh, you didn't get the apartment. You just think, oh, it was rented out. When really, you know, if you looked more, quote, typical, normal, you know, whatever. So it's insidious and it's not always, you know, obvious. Yes.
Did you keep track in any way of the demographics of the person, of the whatever salesman or realtor or?
Did I take into account or have data on who the salespeople were? I only have whatever data my students presented, and I think sadly, it's Jeff City for most of this. So most of the places they would go, there were white people, and I think they might have said like, well, even though it was a black person who was there, they did, but pretty much the discrimination was happening by white people, you know.
What
Yeah.
about age?
I have no idea. Right now, I could tell you that, yes.
I'm just curious, I don't know how long the inherent bias tools have been around.
Yeah,
But I would be curious if that were something that you started the class with, just so that people became aware of their own implicit biases before they, or do you do that afterward so that they don't walk out there knowing things about themselves as well?
well, when I first started teaching did we know about the implicit bias test, which you can go on Harvard's website and look up implicit bias, and they have it for all different things. They have it for like being fat, they have it for, and then it's allowed you're fat now. They want to say fat. So, you know, you can go for race, you can go for other things, but I don't believe it was there when I first started teaching. And so I had gotten myself in a way of teaching, which one of the things we did at first with every group we looked at was we had blackboards back then. We would list the stereotypes, like whatever group, you know, like black men, we did. And I said, I know it's really uncomfortable. I have a bunch of black men in my class. And I said, you know, but we need to dig in and figure out what's going on. And so we'd write them all down, and then we'd look at them like, well, wow, look at that, you know. We did stereotypes of men and women, and then we looked at, you know, that we did our own, like, bringing to the surface in a different way. But in the 90s, like, most people maybe didn't even have a computer. And so I have taken one of the implicit bias tests, but we didn't use that route. We did a lot of talking, a lot of writing, a lot of looking, and even students who frankly came to class and probably never did a reading learned something because they were in the class and we talked and we shared about the experiences that people had. And especially my black students who came in, and one day a black male, he had never been the driver of the car, but he had been pulled over 4 times in one day in Jeff City. And interestingly, that exact day when I was living in Jeff City, I had taken my car in, and they said, oh, you have a tail light out, you have a blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know, did they pull? I mean, I don't want to be pulled over, but I'd like to know if my tail light's out. You know, I'm driving the same place they're driving, and they're getting picked up 4 different times in a day. So there are so many like confirming things that happened, but I did not use that test in particular. Let's see what we have online. Do we have any questions? Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I just don't want to leave people out. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So probably 15 years ago now, I had a student who was using a wheelchair, and I said, oh, are you okay to get to class? Things like that. He goes, look, I have a limitation. I'm not handicapped and I'm not disabled, but it's not the same thing. And so she gave me a good education. He has a disability. He is not handicapped.
Right.
Never said it differently in all those years.
Yeah, and a lot of times we do that, they call it person first language, like a person who has to use a wheelchair instead of like don't ever say like wheelchair bound. Or, we try to put the person first, other than with deaf people want it to be deaf people. So you gotta, there's not a rule I can just tell you that's gonna work everywhere. There's a lot, I had Black students who didn't want to be called Black, they would call African American. In the same classroom, my students said, I don't want to be called African American, I'm not from Africa, I want to be called Black. It's like, whatever, I do my best. I also realize that doing your best, you're still gonna possibly offend people, but we did it in a spirit of learning. And honestly, 16 years I taught this class were the best teaching I've ever had. I learned so much, students learned so much. I still have students, they're now in their 50s, and I'll still every so often, you have to hear this diversity story, or they call me. Like I had a Black student who at the mall was like everybody else went into a certain, store and had their bags, and they got to walk around with their bags. But my Black student, they said, you need to leave park your bag, here behind the counter. And she called me over the weekend and was like, I need to talk to you. Or she sent me, whatever. It was, what do I do about this? I'm like, oh, talk to the manager. She said, that was the manager. And then,
Oh,
so we had to figure out what to do. I mean, another pretty cool thing that happened was from these students realizing what's going on, they actually became advocates for each other. So I'll just tell a tale about Lincoln. There was a time when at Lincoln, most of the students who live on campus, at least at the time I was there, were African American. And it was summer and it was hot and they were all outside on the parking lot. And it was time to change the police force for the night, and they were gonna have fewer people. And they told students to go in, they were like, no, it's our porch where, we want to be outside in the parking lot. And they were tear gassed. And again, it was me, like, oh, Dr. Browning, what do we do? We processed it in class. We got a forum with the president and other people. And I noticed that almost every student who stood up and said something was a student that I had. So a class like this is very empowering for anybody, whether you're in the majority, the minority, and all the intersectionality, because even if you're a male, you might be a poor male or a gay male or, Muslim male or whatever. Yes, Mara or.
Oh, I had a question.
Yes.
That's on. Oh, do you know if Columbia College and MU have a similar diversity class now?
I used to know about MU because I once went there to try to talk to them about that. I think they're more into, like, at least they were. I don't even think Lincoln got rid of this class, and then they got rid of all their DEI policies too. So this class has not existed for quite a while, which I thought was pretty sad, especially at an HBCU. That was way before Trump, though. There are a lot of conservative people, even people of color, who see this as revolutionary, rebellious, too progressive, too left wing, whatever. I don't know a thing about what Columbia College does, but it is pretty normal at most bigger schools who have more teachers and more coursework to say, like, you pick, 2 from column A and 1 from women in literature, and then blah, blah, blah. And they think that's good enough. But honestly, having a whole class dedicated to this was really powerful, because we could see how everything worked together. Mara and then Maggie, and if anybody else that I don't know,
Oh, okay. I was just going to tell you about an experience that actually Carl and I had yesterday in our Tai Chi class in the morning. It was after class, and we were talking to people, and there's a woman who started to come to Tai Chi whose name is Maria, and she's a Mexican woman. She's a immigrant, but a naturalized citizen. And we were talking to her. She had recently moved from North Dakota, so we just had met her a few times. And I was wearing yesterday at Tai Chi, I was wearing a button that said, Stop Project 2025. And she said, I like your button. And then she immediately, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but she immediately launched into, even when I go out for a walk now, I have to carry my passport with me because I'm afraid of people, and I'm afraid that even if they pick me up, that they'll think it's fake. And she said, and even my accent, I'm so afraid to talk to people because people are getting taken just for having an accent. And it was so sad, wasn't it? It was so sad to think that somebody would walk around in fear like that right now, today. And then I was at Aldi's later in the day. And anybody who shops at Aldi's knows that you walk into that Aldi's, there's some vegetables that are on sale, and then there's some more back there. Anyway, there were some avocados there, and there was a woman looking at the avocados. And she was I later learned she was a Spanish speaker. I don't know where she was from. And I had told her, oh, a lot of times the avocados are better in the other section, right? And helpful tip from all these shoppers, right? And she looked at me with a face of panic. And I realized she didn't understand what I said. And so then I said it in Spanish, just because I happen to speak Spanish. And she all of a sudden looked relieved. And it occurred to me, reflecting on those things, that the Project 2025 button, and then the being able to speak Spanish created a sense of relief. And I thought to myself, there are all these people in our community who are feeling really, really scared right now. So it's sort of similar to what we used to call the safe space concept. How can we signal to them just by sight that we are not going to discriminate against you? And I was just wondering your thoughts on that. How do you signal that to people out on the street?
That reminds me of something that happened to me personally, and not related to this class. So I used to have a car that, it said, I got the beat, reggae and African music, peace is patriot. It had 22 buttons, and they were all liberal. And one.
I saw that.
Yeah. But anyway, and at the time my car was parked outside, and a Black man came to my door. This is like 25, I've lived in that house. And he knocked on the door and asked if he could use the phone. And I don't let anybody in, but I took my phone outside and let him use it. And later I thought, well, he's parked away. Why did he come to me? And I'm like, oh, I have friendly bumper stickers. I mean, maybe I was the only person home, who knows, but still, I think you can signal with us. I mean, a smile, like I see people wearing a hijab and I smile and they smile back. Smiling is easy. Wave, smile, or just like make small talk. I make small talk with everyone, but I for sure make small talk with people that don't look exactly like me, that might be a different race or look like they're a different religion, like being out, in a store and just being like, oh, hey, blah, 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 like you said, noticing things and just trying to be like, I'm already a friendly person, but just be friendly, but also realize, like Mara just told us, people may be freaking out that you're, who are you? I don't look very threatening anymore, but got my white hair and everything. But still, people might be frightened. And does anybody else have any other thoughts? Yeah, Corey.
I agree with you. She says, smile. I think sometimes I find myself, I need help on checking myself. When you're trying to be, oh, look at how I'm going to be nice, I'm going to be understanding. But I see a particular type of a homeless person.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden that stuff comes up, and that's where I find myself having trouble in encountering certain populations and I'm looking for any answers like, oh, you get yourself, come on, Lori.
No.
You know what I mean? Am I being ideal?
No, I think what you're doing is actually perfect. What we say is get it to that meta level where you're looking down at yourself and thinking, oh, what did I just do? Believe me, I have had stereotypical thoughts. I have seen like a Black person mowing a lawn and thought, oh, they don't live here. No, I'm not like proud of it. That's the first thought that came in my mind. Now, maybe they do, or maybe they don't, because I don't know. But when you have the thought, to stop and think, oh, I had a racist thought. I had a homeless, anti-homeless thought. And then talk to yourself and try to be like, well, I could just smile. You don't have to do anything else. Smile, say hello, or whatever, or just notice that you had that and then try not to do that again. And I know we're at the end, but if anybody does want to stop later, I could stay for a few minutes.
So thank you so much, Nancy Browning, for that really interesting. And I want everyone to know that this will be on YouTube. So if you want to see it again or share it with others, it's on the LEAP site and the library site. And I may not have mentioned the next Lunch and Learn on March 11th, and Rebecca Roselet from the Public Health the Boone County Public Health Department will be here to talk about public health in 2026. And then a reminder again that when she votes is at the Columbia Public Library, February 21st, 10 o'clock. And then the election forum for the league, March 19th here at the library. And thank you so much again.
It's so fun. Appreciate you all. Anybody, I mean, if you wanna stay, I could stand here and you can
Right.
stay, or if you wanna come up and ask me something next.
Yeah,
I can add a little bit about it.
I'm sorry, what?
I can add a little bit about community policy on diversity. There was a faculty council meeting